Right. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to wait a few minutes to let people join, and then I'll begin today with hiking safety. Okay, just a few more seconds and then I will begin. Okay, so hi everyone. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Matilda and this is my fourth and unfortunately last live video, so I'm sad for this to be my last one because I've had a lot of fun coming up with all the different topics and coming up with what I want to talk about with everyone. So I hope you've been enjoying my live videos the way I've been enjoying them. And so a little bit about myself before we begin, in case you haven't seen any previous videos yet. I grew up in Sudbury, Ontario, so up in Northern Ontario, and I'm currently a first-year medical student at the University of Ottawa. So I do love the outdoors a lot. You could probably guess based on my other live videos where I talked about Lyme safety and environmental emergencies. I spend a lot of time outdoors, and being from a city with lots of outdoor things to do, I really grew to love, hiking and camping and all those things that you can do outside in nature. And so, although these are really fun things, I do think that there are a lot of things to consider and to bring before, going hiking and doing these other things. So I'm here today to teach you all about all of those things we need to think about when we want to go hiking is what we'll be focusing on, but this can be applied to other outdoor things like camping, and how to do this in a safe and prepared manner. So I definitely thought this would be a good live video today because summer is coming around the corner, although it doesn't seem like that today because it is snowing. But other than that, the weather has been warming up, and maybe this can convince some people to start spending more time outdoors in our beautiful country. We have so many trails and so many camping spots and provincial parks that just need to be seen. So I'm hoping that this will maybe give people the confidence to embark on more of this summer. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about with hiking is the 10 essentials that you should bring with you. So there are a general 10 things that people always recommend to bring with you when you're doing, outdoor activities such as hiking. And so basically these are items that will help you, especially in emergency situations. So this is especially important for beginners because, of course, when you're a beginner, you might not be as prepared, or you might make mistakes that a more seasoned hiker might make. So essentially these are the 10 things that most people recommend to bring when you're hiking. And as I go through them, I will talk about which things are more absolutely required versus other things that might be a bit more costly, and you can find replacements for, but I'll work through that as we go. So our first essential is dressing properly. So no matter the season, make sure you bring extra layers to stay warm, even in the summer. So as we all know, weather can change on a dime, and you really want to be prepared. And so some clothing I would recommend is you really want to avoid cotton because cotton absorbs moisture. And this can be either from rain or it can be from sweat if you're, hiking or other things outside or physical activities, especially in the summer if it's warm out. So moisture from rain and sweat, cotton can absorb that, and then it sucks the heat out of you. So this is the type of clothing that you would try to avoid. You also want to find clothing made of fabrics that dry fast. And so this kind of clothing is more so like exercise, outdoorsy clothing. You can find them at all different stores, all different price ranges. So there's definitely options out there. And then I would also, on top of the warm clothing, I would also bring a windbreaker. Even if it's a hot day, you never know, especially if you're hiking and going higher up. The wind can make you quite cold, and bonus points if the windbreaker is also waterproof, because, rain can obviously happen too on a dime, and so it's always good to be prepared. And finally, in terms of dressing properly, I also recommend really good footwear. And so, of course, like the stellar footwear that you can wear when hiking would be proper hiking shoes or hiking boots, because these have really good ankle support. They're built for it. They're made to make your feet comfortable and protect you in case of any injuries. Like if you were to like slip on rugged terrain, they have that support for your ankle. But, not everyone has hiking shoes. So, if you have like normal running shoes that are made for activity can also work. Of course, hiking shoes would be the safest, but not everyone owns hiking shoes, so running shoes are definitely good as long as the shoes you have are comfortable, made for exercise and activity, or else you can risk things like injury and smaller things like blisters. So our first thing was dressing properly. The second thing is a type of navigational device, like a GPS. And so this one I would say is less required, especially if you know that you are going on a very popular, very short hike that's really well marked, like you've done your research, you know it's well marked, and you're hiking during the daylight hours. This is like less required because, you always have a trail to follow. But I find GPSs are very helpful if you are ever in a situation where, one, your phone dies, because I know a lot of people use their phones when they're hiking as the navigation tool, but also phones don't have service everywhere on certain hikes. And so if you were to get lost, a phone isn't really going to help you, but a GPS will. So of course, this is like an extra expense. I don't always bring a GPS with me when I'm hiking, but it's definitely something to consider, especially if you want to start doing more difficult hikes or more hikes that are more not as popular, and hikes that have service for your phone. Okay, so then our third thing on our essential items list is nutrition. And so I recommend bringing extra food like high energy bars and dry foods that can really help sustain you should you end up spending more time hiking than you were expecting. And this is really common, especially in beginners. I still do this sometimes too, where the hike that I plan to do ends up taking a lot longer because, you might be taking a wrong turn, or maybe you decide to do a second trail and you end up getting hungry. And of course, when you're hiking, this is, physical activity, you need fuel to be able to keep going. And so it's always important to bring extra food, and especially if you're hiking with other people who forgot food as well, you can be, the hero of the day and be able to give them something that can keep them going as well. So my third essential item is nutrition. Next, my fourth essential item is water. And so, of course, this is so important. When I mentioned in my previous live video about, heat stroke and sun exhaustion, it's really important to carry water and drink water to avoid these things. So even on a not sunny day, of course, water is important, but especially when you're doing exercise on a hot day and you're sweating, you need to be replenishing your fluids with water. And so it's especially important to bring water because you don't want to have to resort to drinking water in like the streams or the lakes around the area of like the hike or the trail that you're going on, because this water can contain a lot of like microorganisms that can make you quite sick. So for example, where I'm from, a lot of the water has this stuff called blue-green algae, and that can make you really, really sick if you drink it. So it's really important to bring water so that you're not, really parched and left, maybe considering resorting to drinking the lake water, because that's not good for you. All right, so next, my fifth essential item is sun protection. And again, like my last live video when I talked about sun exhaustion and heat stroke, sun protection can really protect you from that, as well as sunburns and skin cancer. So what I would recommend for this is, of course, sunscreen, reapply every 2 hours. Also, lip balm can have sunscreen as well. A lot of people forget that your lips can burn. Sunglasses as well, because your eyes can be damaged by the sun, and also a hat. And this is especially good to think about between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. because that's when the sun and like the UV rays are strongest. All right, so 6th on the list is illumination, and so that typically would mean like a little headlamp. And this is important in case your hike gets delayed and you end up hiking as it's getting darker out, because you want to be able to see where you're walking. You want to be able to make sure you're following the trail markers. You don't want to trip on anything. You want to be able to see if there's any wildlife around that you need to be mindful of. And this is also important in case poorer weather comes in and visual conditions worsen. So it's important to bring illumination in the cases of these scenarios. Okay, and then my 7th essential item is first aid supplies. And so, of course, the size of your first aid kit can really depend on the number of people that you're going with, the length of the trip, how far you're going, maybe the level of risk of the trip, like let's say like a 1 hour trail hike versus like a 5-day backcountry trip, very different scenarios. So of course those can be, the first aid kit in this case can be really changed, added, and taken things away based on where you're going. But items that I think everyone should be bringing with them would include bandages, because in the outdoors you can always, you might like maybe scrape your knee on something, or maybe you get a blister on your shoes. So it's good to have bandages. It's also good to have scissors, a splint, bug spray, and then alcohol wipes to help disinfect anything before you put the bandage on. Okay, and then number 8, I always recommend bringing matches. And so this is in case, you need to start a fire. So if you are doing like a backcountry trip, of course, you bring matches so you can start a fire and cook your food. But also, if you were to get lost and you're in a bit of a more difficult hike farther away from the city, having a fire can help with both warmth, and in case you get lost, it can help with a signal. People will be able to see the fire and know where you are. Okay, and then our 9th essential item is emergency shelter. And so this is important, of course, because again, you can end up in a scenario where you need, emergency shelter. And so, of course, if you're on an overnight trip, you already have a tent and sleeping bag. But on a day hike, you probably don't want to be bringing a tent. Of course, that's a lot of things to be lugging around for just a day hike. And so I know that some people bring an emergency blanket. So it's this big blanket. It keeps you warm. It's normally orange. And so this orange color can both attract attention, and it's highly visible. So it's good in case you are in an emergency. And this is something that you don't necessarily have to bring. I don't often bring emergency shelter, but depending on the severity of your trail, again, this is something that you could consider bringing. And then finally, for our 10th essential item, you can always bring a knife. And so a knife can actually come in handy for many things. I could list so many things, but just a simple Swiss Army knife or something can always be good in case you have to cut bandages, or in case you are eating food and you need help opening something or anything like that. A knife can always come in handy. Okay, and so these are all of our 10 items. We have dressing properly, GPS, nutrition, water, sun protection, illumination, first aid supplies, matches, shelter, and a knife. And so I know this seems very overwhelming, and it sounds like a lot, especially if you're a new hiker, and it can be overwhelming, the idea of maybe having to buy things. And I think there's almost no way beginners can buy all of this new unless you're very fortunate. So what I recommend is just use what you have at home. You probably have a lot of these things lying around. They don't have to be specifically made for hiking when you're just beginning. You don't need a special knife, you don't need any special shoes. Use what you have at home, and then also borrow gear from friends and family that maybe do this a lot, because that can let you dip your toes in and see if you like it. And then as you start getting more serious about hiking or camping or anything involving the outdoors, you can consider upgrading your gear and making that commitment. But yeah, I definitely would recommend first borrowing and not spending the money, just in case maybe hiking isn't for you and you don't want to have spend unnecessary money, for sure. Alright, so next I'm going to give some general tips on what to do when you're hiking. So the first, and I think is the most important, is make your plan. And so before you go, I think you should really plan out your hiking trip. So this involves telling a person back home your full entire plan, what your route is, and when you plan to come home. And this is important because if they don't hear from you, they can start an emergency search in the off chance that, something, maybe an accident has happened. And so this is, of course, for emergency, not to scare anyone away from hiking. I've never had an emergency where in all my years of hiking where I've needed an emergency search. It's rare, but it's like they happen on a dime, of course. And so the reason why you tell a person is on the off chance that something bad does happen, that you will be safe, I guess. You have that emergency plan. So yeah, definitely make sure that, especially it's important to tell them when you plan to come back, because if they don't hear from you, that's when they will sound the alarm. Right, my next tip is to hike with a hiking buddy. And so this isn't a tip I would tell everyone, because I know some people like to do hiking and exercise by themselves, and of course there's nothing wrong with that, but it can make it more fun, and especially if you're a beginner, it can make it a bit more safer if you have a buddy with you. And furthermore, if you are hiking to for like fitness goals, then you have someone who's kind of keeping you accountable, which is fun. So you can definitely consider bringing a hiking buddy if that's something that you're interested in. And then my third tip is to really do your research. So research the hike you want to do beforehand and prepare for what you research. So I find a lot of the times when I hike, I find that people are always asking me like, oh, what trail am I on? How much longer to the top? And am I in the right place? And where is the parking lot? And so you shouldn't have to ask these questions if you prepared properly. And it makes me nervous when someone asks me that, because I'm like, oh, like, you don't know how long this hike is? Like, are you prepared for it? Do you have enough water for it? So definitely know all of these things before you go on a hike. I find some really good websites for this. There's one called All Trails. It'll give you a lot of info on the hike you plan to go on, and it also allows you to download the map onto your phone so that you can even use it without service. Of course, if your phone were to die, then that wouldn't work anymore, which is why the GPS, as I said earlier, is always a good bet. But for shorter hikes, All Trails is really good with that. And another way to get information instead of a website is you can even call the number for the ranger or the information centers for that like provincial park or that area. And normally they can give you some really good information. As well, with doing your research, it's really important to check the weather and prepare for the weather. So if there are any like significant weather warnings, like extreme heat or extreme rain, I would caution against going at all. And even if the weather isn't that disastrous, but you don't have the right equipment for it, like maybe it's only raining, but you don't have, good waterproof footwear and clothing, I would also caution against going as well, just to be safe. And then finally, included in doing your research for a hike, I would definitely check for wildlife in the area. So that includes both animals and plants. And so I talk about animals in a separate point, so I'll get to that. But for plants, just search up the ones to be wary about. So an example would be poison ivy. I'm sure you guys have heard of poison ivy. There's the classic phrase, leaves of 3, let it be. And so just become familiar with what the plants look like that you should be wary of. And then know about like what you should do if you ever come in contact with any of these plants. So like, for example, if you come in contact with poison ivy, you need to wash your skin immediately, because many of us are allergic to the resin, like the oil that's found on like the leaves and the stem of that plant, and so that can cause like an itchy rash that blisters. So it's important to be mindful of the plants that you could come encounter with while hiking, for sure. Right, my next tip is to not walk off trails. And so, as I've taught before in a previous live, if you walk off trails, you have a higher risk of getting a tick bite, which is bad. But there's also other things, like you could encounter poison ivy off the trail. You can also get lost if you leave the trail and you leave the markers. You can get hurt. One thing I like to tell people is the trails are there for a reason. People have made these trails because they've like determined them safe. They've really cleared it out for you so that it's safe for you. And so it's always in your best interest to stay on the trail. All right, my next tip is the leave no traces principle. So it's really important to take all your garbage with you. And this includes natural things like banana peels or apple cores. So even if like these things decompose, it still can take a long time. It can even attract animals to the walking route. And so that's not good, because then that could, that could be bad for the animal, could be bad for the hikers on the trail. So yeah, definitely take all garbage with you. Leave no trace behind that you were on that trail. Okay, and then now I'm going to talk a little bit about, checking for animals in the area. So again, it's really important to research what animals you have in the area of your hike. And if you encounter any wildlife or animals, it's really important to keep your distance, like back away slowly, and definitely don't run, and definitely know what to do in case you run into an animal. So I'll give an example. Since I'm from Sudbury, I usually hike in areas with black bears. There's quite a few of them, and bears are quite common, honestly, in all around Canada as well. And so, like, some tips that we're always told is you never want to approach a bear, especially cubs, because if there's cubs, that means the mama is nearby and she is the most dangerous. You also really want to make your presence known by talking loudly. You can wave your arms around. We were also always told to get on each other's back like a piggyback to make ourselves look bigger and wave our arms. This is just, if we make our presence known, then the bear will know that we're there. And honestly, bears are more scared of us than we are of them, so then they'll like probably wander away. And as an extra precaution, you can carry bear spray with you. I know some people in my hometown, when they go on runs in the trails, they bring bear spray because encounters are pretty common. And then another thing to consider is that you should never run from a bear. They are like faster than you, and if you start to run, that will trigger them to chase you, which is not good. And then finally, don't make eye contact with them, because that can also be seen as a sign of aggression. So these are all things to think about with bears, but of course, wherever you're hiking, do your due diligence, research what animals are in that area and what you should do if you encounter them. Okay, and finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about just nice general trail manners. So when you pass by another hiker, you can say hello. I feel like it's a really common manner thing to do when you're hiking, is you always say hi when you pass by someone. And then another thing is when you're on the trail and you're going perhaps like up or down a hill, the downhill hiker, the one who's going down, should stop and step aside and create space for the hiker going uphill. This is because the hiker going uphill normally has less of a visual field, and they often aren't concentrating because they're doing the harder work of going up the hill. So the person going down should stop and let the hikers come up, and then you go down. Also, it's common courtesy to not play like really loud music when there are other people around, because not everyone has the same music taste as you. And finally, if you're slower than the people behind you, you can step aside and let them pass. It's another important trail manner to remember. And yeah, so I've gone through everything I wanted to talk about today in this live. I've talked about the 10 essentials you should bring, and tips to think about when you want to embark on hiking. This can also go hand in hand with camping as well. Of course, with camping, you bring a lot more things with you, and that obviously different things can change depending on whether you're camping in a provincial park, where there's campsites and there's rest stations, or if you were to go camping like backcountry camping where you're kind of doing your own thing in a place that's not like campsites. So all of these things can change, and all these things can be researched, and lots of information online, but ultimately these are some general tips and things to bring with you when you're embarking on some fun outdoor adventures. Alright, so I am going to read my comments. Oh yeah, hiking and camping is so fun. Headlamps are good. Water purifying drinking bottles are also a really, really, really good idea. That's also really smart, because then you can use water in like the streams and things, because it purifies it for you. So that helps if you're especially going on a longer hike. You don't want to be carrying so much water, because it can be very heavy, and so that lets you purify the water. So that's a really good point. You can definitely get water purifying drinking bottles. They can be a little bit more expensive, but if you do hike a lot or do outdoor things a lot, it's a good investment to have for sure. Yeah, and hiking buddy. I've never hiked by myself. Some people do it and they're more confident. I'm definitely not as confident. And I like having the companionship, but I always recommend a hiking buddy, especially if you're a beginner. Yeah, All Trails is a great app. Yeah, thank you. I love to compile information for these lives. They're really fun. I hope this has been informative for everyone, and thank you for letting me have all these live videos. It's been really fun. Okay, and I think I'll end it here. Thank you.